cracking, lads? Welcome back to the Container Chats podcast. I'm Sharon here, and I'm with my boy, Adam Ponting.
Hello. Yeah, today we have Ella in the container.
Hey.
A contemporary artist and graduated anthropologist. I know it's not exactly that, but let's just say it's that. Or something. Yeah.
You know what degree I did, right?
Anyways, moving on swiftly. Who is gearing up to release her next album and her debut EP, Blue. Like after a debut EP, Blue. Yeah.
Okay, so Ella, welcome to the container. It's not every day you do a podcast in a shipping container. Adam tells me you do some podcasts and interviews of your own. What is your podcast called again?
I'm planning on doing a podcast once I finish my album called Curiosity, where I have different people from the queer community on, talking about a topic that interests them or that's personal to them, and then also having some like fun game show elements. That's a plan anyway.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. Like in terms like the details of like the whole like asking everyone about their experience being bi, like what are you gonna kind of like go into in like more detail, do you think, with that?
With bisexuality?
Yeah. If you thought about it, I know it's it's upcoming, but
I don't know. I mean, I was on a podcast where I talked a bit about like biracial and bi invisibility, and I think that's something that isn't always explored, and the bisexual community makes up like something like over half of the queer community, and yet it's still pretty stigmatized. So I think maybe delving more into that. But I mean, yeah, I think there's only so much I can talk about myself. Like, I'm quite privileged, and so having people on who can speak from experience and things that I don't have as much of an understanding or like life experience about.
Yeah, like different mindsets and all.
Yeah.
So
sure.
what gave you that's what gave you inspiration for this podcast, I'm assuming. What do you want to make out of your podcast in the future? Like, what is it you want to do with it? I know it's very early.
yeah, very early
but,
stages. I think like, I don't know, I've always just really loved like listening to other people's stories and providing other people platforms to share their voice, especially marginalized people. And so yeah, I love like getting to know people, and I love hearing people's stories. And I think like, yeah, I think curiosity has sort of sparked it a lot.
So let's talk a little bit about like Oxford, and Edinburgh and all that.
Oh, okay.
So you were born in 1998 in Oxford, and then you moved to Edinburgh around, I think, 2017.
That is correct.
So a little bit, what was your overall experience of Oxford in your early to mid-teens?
I know that's like a long period, but like
early to mid-teens. Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting. I think like, yeah, early to mid-teens were quite difficult for me. I think mental health wise it wasn't great, and there wasn't as much awareness as there is now, or as much of a dialogue about it, and also like going through puberty at the same time, like discovering my sexuality, like plus having like friend drama and boy drama, and it's like it's a lot.
yeah.
And yeah, I had some good experiences, but I also had some not so great experiences. But I think overall, like, I was just very lucky to have the support system I did, to have such great parents, to have this one over here, my brother.
You could have said family and extended it to me, but
the afterthought, yeah. No, but I mean, I know other people in my situation who like didn't have as great of a support network, and like, it really does make all the difference, I think.
Yeah.
How would you compare that to like Edinburgh and also Lancaster, where you went to university?
Oh, interesting. I think like it's really difficult. I think the difference between Oxford and Edinburgh felt a bit like jarring, not in a bad way, but just it felt very different. But I really enjoyed it because I think you found this as well. Like, people are much friendlier in general. There's just a more friendly atmosphere, and I think like especially Adam and I growing up, like we're quite like smiley, like talkative people, and that just wasn't always the vibe in Oxford. Like it could be a little stuffy and a little dismissive almost. And I think that's also just aging and like people actually wanting to make friends and it being cool to like talk to people and like be nice. So I think that's also part of it. But it was difficult at first, but in general I love Edinburgh as a city. It sort of has that community feel that Oxford had, but it has more opportunities, and culturally is much more interesting in my opinion.
I'm wondering, like, do you think there were like any defining moments, like that kind of like, I don't know, really like, that you really like look back on, like in Oxford, like because you know it was a long period of time, but you probably like think about like some things like a lot more than others. So, do you think you have any of those moments, or
like from which part of my life specifically?
Yeah, I guess just in general from Oxford.
Yeah, just in general from Oxford.
Yeah.
Even to like early mid-teens, like maybe right before you came to Edinburgh.
Ooh, okay. Defining moments. I guess things like moving house, like those were quite big changes. Like Adam and I were in our like sort of family house, like where we both grew up for like quite a few years. And I remember when we moved out of that house, like that was quite like difficult originally. Like, I mean, we weren't even moving that far, but I think just that change and like we literally not known anything different. I guess also things like mental health diagnoses, and like I think when I was 14 I discovered I was like bisexual, and so like there are definitely some moments I can kind of pinpoint as being like quite formative, but it's difficult to say. I think I think sometimes I don't always look back on that period because it's got sort of mixed emotions for me.
Same here.
Yeah.
I can imagine even more so with you.
So upon moving to Edinburgh, how did you build your social circle and your network to what it is today?
Oh my gosh. Well, initially I didn't, to be quite honest. Like I suffer from depression, and it was untreated for many years. And for the first like year I was here, I honestly could barely get out of bed and function. Just about managed to have a part-time job. But otherwise I was very much like I didn't feel like a human. I just kind of felt like a ghost.
I understand that.
Yeah, so for a while, like I just wasn't even in the headspace to like meet people or like sustain friendships. Like I don't think I was a that great friend, to be honest, during those years, because I was so in my own head. I just didn't even have the space to like give my energy to a friendship or to something else.
Out of curiosity, considering that you're English, did you have issues with like the Scottish English divide? Like, you know how people make the jokes like the filthy English and whatnot. So
I mean, I tend to be the one agreeing or making those jokes, to be honest. Like me and Adam are both very much like fucking Southerners, being Southerners ourselves. Which is
kind of embrace the irony.
We embrace the irony. And like I think it's interesting because like English patriotism is kind of disgusting, but like Scottish patriotism is very different, and like culturally and historically just very different.
Very beautiful.
Yeah. Not always, but it can be. Which is definitely
what would you say like your favourite kind of experiences have been in Scotland, in Edinburgh, like in general?
I think I'd have to say like the music scene, and I started doing open mics and gigs, which I had done like very like low key, like occasionally at like a talent show or something. I would like occasionally do stuff like that, but like very rarely. But like doing that like by myself and like going to these open mics and like getting chunked out of musicians, like that was like a real form of community and like really
what was it like the first one that you ever went to? Because I can imagine that would be like quite nerve-wracking.
I mean I had a mix of experiences. I think the first one that I did in Edinburgh like was the Forest Cafe. It's no longer around, but it was like a volunteer vegetarian vegan cafe that would have I as I was saying, and I was like, this is very me. They would also have like open mic kind of things in the evening, like once a week. And I was doing a volunteer shift there, and they were doing it, and I just kind of spur of the moment was like, all right, I'll play. And then just since that, I like when I would come back from Lancaster Uni, where I did my undergrad, where I come back over the summer, I would like go to bars and do that kind of thing when I had the time and the energy. But I definitely had a mix of experiences, so it did put me off. Some of the places put me off doing that a little bit, and especially being like a young female musician and like performing very like vulnerable songs and like being in a slightly vulnerable position, really.
I can understand. Okay, so I wanted to ask, right, so when you came to Edinburgh, you were on a gap year at the time. I know you went to Zambia. But we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute.
Yeah.
What are other things that you did during this time in your gap year? I know, of course, you were saying like mental health with like part-time jobs, your music. Like, was there like, is that like your main kind of things that you did during that time?
Yeah, main things I did or didn't do. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So I worked a part-time job at this sort of premium cookware store, which was interesting. No, like I had very nice colleagues and stuff. It just, wasn't for me. And ultimately, I'm not a salesperson. It turns out.
Wait, what kind
I'm
of
not a
job
very
is this?
good salesperson. I was selling like premium cookware.
You heard of Le Creuset?
Oh no! Wait, were you like the spokesperson? Like, did you actually sell it to them? Like
I don't think anyone would hire me as a spokesperson, especially for Le Creuset. No, I was just like, on the shop floor and stuff, but essentially I was having to like upsell and like talk about how I use my Le Creuset.
Did you ever have to do one of those interviews where you had to like sell like a cup or something? I remember I had to do that. Like, they gave us all a company interviews. Like, okay, you had to sell us this cup. Like, make it the best cup alive.
Wow, that's interesting. I'm gonna go with no.
Same.
But we did. No, I think we did have like a sort of what would you do in this situation, scenarios that they would give us during the interview process. I mean, this was like years ago now. Don't really remember. But yeah, I guess that was one of the main things. I applied for like something like 30 jobs before that, all to like catering places. Got none of them. Big surprise since I had no catering experience. I was like, I'm vegan, I cook, they will hire me. I was wrong. I was very wrong. And I did a cookery course for a month as well, which I again thought would help me get a job. Also did not, but it was an interesting month. Yeah.
And it did allow you to like kind of correct Jules like I'm on a few things I'm guessing.
Oh, that
you're
was
cooking,
yeah.
Which I'm guessing was a lot
The best
fun.
part.
The best part.
Yeah,
of it.
my mum. How do I put this? Essentially undiagnosed ADHD, running around in the kitchen like.
Don't know who that sounds like.
Yeah.
The entire family, actually.
Honestly, other than my dad, like I'm pretty sure we all have ADD.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, I think, my mum is quite chaotic and she'll just be like loosely follow a recipe, which can work if you're like a professional cook, but if you're chucking just like some random bit of squash or turnip into like a lasagna, like it's not always gonna work.
Yeah.
But no, she would always cook very creative things.
Yeah. So how about we move on to Zambia now? I know we still get back
Let's
to it. So in the second half, of your gap year, you went to Zambia to teach children sexual education and maybe other subjects as well. Like what made you like choose to do this? Like how did it start?
Well, I've always been interested in like feminism. When I was looking for an undergrad, I knew I wanted to do gender studies as an undergrad, but that was not an option. Me as a young budding feminist was like, I need to know more. But yeah, they didn't offer that kind of course. But anyway, so I was like, okay, this is, a way to sort of get more experience and also to get experience working with kids, which is something I've always enjoyed. And yeah, so it was sort of on girl impact projects, they called it. So it was, a range of stuff, like teaching about like sort of sex ed, menstruation, things like that. And then also helping projects like girls farming, girls rugby. Again, I wasn't any help with farming or rugby, to be honest. But I think just having people there supervising was, helpful. It was like a range of stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, and so you said in terms of like the sexual education part of things, it was menstruation and like what else like?
Things like puberty, menstruation, gender-based violence, bullying, friendships, like all sorts of topics. It kind of depended on the age range as well.
Right. So you're teaching across multiple ages then.
We're teaching on several sort of like girls club, they called it. So essentially we would have a girls club for different age groups. And so it kind of depended on, I mean, we would touch on heavier stuff with the younger years actually, but it just sort of, we would start with things like bullying and friendships and healthy relationships and then move on to, more hard-hitting kind of stuff. Yeah.
And of course, it's very different. Like here, like what is taught, like culture, everything. So like, what was what was like the knowledge that like the kids had like before, like when you went in and like started teaching, like versus like what they came out with? Like, where did you start from, and like where did you kind of end things?
Honestly, the kids had a much better understanding than kids here about like the science of it. Like it was kind of like they'd memorized a textbook, so they knew logistically what happens during like puberty, menstruation, like they knew it all. But I think the emotional part they hadn't really talked about with someone before. And so I think like one of my favorite groups was like sort of girls aged like 14, 15, and like we'd split up into little groups, and like as soon as we did that, they'd all start like asking me questions about like sex and emotions and like boyfriends and all this kind of stuff. And it just felt like I was kind of like, you know, we're just chatting, and I was giving them some like sort of, you know, sisterly advice almost, you know.
That must have been great. I mean, you know, I don't know what situation like they were in, like all the people that you were teaching, but it you know, it must have been good to give them a space just to comfortably like, you know, talk about these things.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. And like obviously it's good that they felt safe to like ask me questions and stuff as well, because, you know, especially with topics like sex, I think a lot of us are, especially women, are taught to be very sort of quite shy and quiet and not very open about it.
Yeah, considering the culture of Zambia, like where they have that more conservative, shy, was there any like issues or like things that happened because of like the way you taught, like cultural differences that clashed?
Yeah, so we didn't really receive cultural training, and in hindsight, I don't think I would do that kind of project again, just because I feel like there are sort of colonial implications with like going into that kind of environment, equally not having cultural training, and like, you know, you're going in and you're going out, and they don't have that like consistency as well, which can't be great, like mental health wise and stuff. But again, hindsight.
We actually have a question of colonizer vibes, like
colonizer vibes.
Was it quite a lot, like?
It's different. I don't know how to put it. I mean, yeah, like it would not have been intentional, but like it's kind of unavoidable. You're these white people going in and teaching like you have all the knowledge somehow, which is clearly I did not. And like I always say when I talk about it, like I feel like I learned more from them, to be honest, and like learned more even just immersing yourself in a different culture.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to learn a lot.
What did you learn from them, would you say?
I think just like, honestly, the importance of like feminism and the differences in feminism and attitudes in different places. Yeah, like it was quite different. I think
it's very important to remember that like feminism heavily depends on that area.
Yes.
For example, in America, feminism is all about like the much more progressive or like very like much more specific issues. When someone like India, women truly need feminism for another reason. It's because women are being treated as second, maybe even third class citizens.
I mean, there are a lot of places
Zambia.
that are like, you know, developing countries that like, or less economically developed countries that are, you know, doing some stuff a lot better really than parts of like, you know, the more developed.
Of course, you could have run the world, you know, like the developed West, the undeveloped East. It's all kind of like these. They're just names that are like given by some sort of authority.
Exactly.
Like,
that's why it feels weird, like categorizing. It's very sort of us and them narratives.
I also wanted to ask. So when you were in Zambia, did you go on like these kind of like holidays, or like you go to these fun trips? And then like I remember me and Adam when we went to South Africa, it's kind of like you would go to this high school, you know, take care of these kids, and then you'd go to this
like
beautiful like theme park, water park, and then you go to your nice fancy hotel, and it didn't feel right. We didn't get this specifically. My brother would tell me how in his time he would go and go to a school with children, only to realize later on by the teachers that those kids were going to die within a few months because they all had AIDS.
Gosh, that's heartbreaking.
Whoa.
Yeah.
But like at the same time, you're having fun in these water parks. You're going on holidays. So it's kind of like this.
Yeah.
I don't know what exactly.
I mean, you're literally vacationing in their lives,
and
like it becomes more about you than about them. Which I think is a problem with a lot of these gap year organisations.
Yeah, and for a lot of people, it's kind of like to give people a purpose or a sense of the world. They go to these places and like now I know the world.
Yeah, it's very much a stereotype for a reason, you know, that I went to Thailand and it changed my my life and I got an elephant tattoo and now I'm spiritual. And,
Yeah.
and it's like, okay, no.
I got Mandela.
You just taught a bunch of black kids and got a tattoo and some elephant print trousers. Like, you're not, that doesn't make you more seasoned in this world. Like, it just makes you kind of a douche. So yeah,
Savage.
relate. I mean, like I said, I'm a culprit of this. I'm 100% culprit of this. And which is why I kind of look back on that and I'm like, oh, Ella, was that a good decision? Probably not.
But you know what? You learn from that. Like,
yeah,
life is an experience. You can't go back to reverse something, but you can have the knowledge of what you have now.
Yeah.
Like, every bad thing in the past, all you have left is the knowledge, the experience, and what you can do after that. Now you know that these gap year things, they're bullshit. Yeah. And now you can think, what are better ways to travel ethically, or better ways to support local communities and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe in the future, maybe it's best not to go with organizations. Just go yourself and then find local charities, local people, or whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's what I've been looking more into, because, a lot of these gap year organizations are, not hugely ethical, not great.
But yeah, back to the teaching. Like, did you enjoy the teaching? Did you get anything out of it? Like, just straight up for the teaching?
I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I would love to do more teaching, like especially with stuff like sex ed. Like I'm very passionate about it, and also like teaching. Like one thing that I couldn't do in Zambia, which was not, it sucked a bit, was I couldn't talk about LGBT stuff because it's illegal there. And I also, I was still sort of closeted at the time, but like not fully closeted. So there was also that worry that they would like, I don't know, find something on my Instagram or whatever. So I had to be quite sort of, and we weren't even allowed to say that like being gay is okay, which is like a basic, human right. It's just like treating people like they're cool, and just accepting their identity and like not doing anything negative about it. But yeah, so that was quite difficult. But so teaching things like teaching about LGBTQ, sex ed, like what healthy relationships look like, consent is a big one. All that I'm really, really passionate about, and I think I speak well about. So I think I would love to do more of that. And I think especially like you can tell when someone's engaged with something when they're not, and if it's something you're passionate about, most likely that's going to come through and they're going to become more engaged with it. And I think especially things like LGBT stuff and consent, all things I can speak on experience. And I think that even if you're not disclosing that experience, I think it's still informing your way of looking at the world and how you articulate yourself and how you express your opinions to others. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So after leaving Zambia, how immediately did you go back into like education?
So after my gap year, I went to Lancaster University to not study anthropology. I have no fucking clue where I got that from. But,
well, I don't know what it calls.
It's called media and cultural studies.
Yeah, but media and cultural studies. Like I needed a word for like someone who's.
Yeah, anthropology is a separate course.
Yeah, so, studying like social like on people.
Yeah.
And culture.
I don't know.
Well,
it's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, anthropology is a study of culture.
Yeah, it's also a separate course though. It's a very different thing.
Yeah, it's very specific.
Yeah.
Okay, leave me alone.
Sorry, we're attacking you now. We're attacking you. It's too easy when your brother is right there in front of you. But yeah, I did media and cultural studies at Lancaster University. So I went to education. Yeah, quite quickly after my gap year.
So, like, you did media and culture studies in Lancaster for 3 years. What drove... Of course, we know a little bit about what drove you to choose media and culture studies now with your love for feminism, and you wanted to get that knowledge because you're... What was it? A crazy bunny rabbit?
A thirsty feminist queen.
Yeah, a thirsty feminist bunny rabbit.
I'd never said either of those things, but there we go.
Was it? No. Oh, yeah, sorry. Was it... So, it came before the gap year, but what, like, aspirations did you have for this degree?
Well, like I said, I knew I wanted to do something that would revolve around, like, gender politics, and I also just wanted to learn more. Like, I think the first time I've become really passionate about, like, learning was learning about feminism, learning about essentially empowering myself, and about once I became more empowered within myself, then I had I felt like I had more of an opportunity to learn from other people and I just had that like thirst for knowledge, I think, more, which I don't think I really had before. And I've always loved writing and literature and and media, and so this was kind of a way to tie all of those in. And yeah, I've always been quite opinionated, and being able to articulate, very funny, and being able to articulate my opinions, and like have that knowledge to back them up, was always quite important to me. Also just in terms of winning arguments, because I like to be right.
There we go. Yeah, you can just edit it down to that. Like
that's what we need. Yeah, we got the answer.
I like to be right, and I am right, you know.
So what like knowledge did you gain then, like throughout the course? Can you give us like a few things, like?
Oh, I think it's difficult just to pinpoint
a
few things. I think
like I guess like modules even, like if you can't think of anything in particular.
One of my favorite modules was called what was it called? It was called like gender and film or something like that. And each week or every 2 weeks we would watch like a film or an episode of like a TV show, and we would talk about a specific sort of type of gender oppression within it. So like ageism and gender, or what were the other? We watched like Sex and the City, which is just so many examples there. They give us so much to work with. So problematic on so many levels. And we watched Twilight. Like it's quite funny because you're watching trash, but you're analysing trash, which is like quite fun, to be honest.
Yeah, very engaging.
But it also means that you have these like sort of feminist goggles on, and so you're watching. I will be watching trash now. And then I hear a voice in the back of my head being like, misogynistic, like, you know, ageist, classist, whatever.
Sounds like a BuzzFeed writer.
When I was younger, I wanted to be a BuzzFeed writer, so that makes sense.
It's never too late.
To be honest, like...
No, I'm good now.
I didn't know that, but that makes perfect sense in like, retrospect.
Oh, yeah. Well, I very, like, BuzzFeed was, like, a big thing when I was, like, 15, and that was when I was, like... You know, forming my opinions, and
it's kind of disappeared now. To be fair, like it's not really as big. Yeah,
I mean, no one near.
Yeah.
No, and the corporation itself is quite exploitative, which is why like a lot of the people who made BuzzFeed big are no longer working there, and they've all sort of like exposed BuzzFeed, I think.
Damn.
Yeah, it's gone.
There's a whole documentary in that, eh?
Oh yeah.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, but if you type in why I left BuzzFeed, you'll get like 50 results. Yeah.
So many.
I definitely remember like seeing a lot of those videos. Anyways, I wanted to ask, like, you know, with obviously it's a lot more obvious when you've got like a degree, you know, in science and technology, and it builds up by teaching, you know, the basic building blocks. But like, how did your course like build up? Like, you know, did like in terms of, you know, teaching you like, you know, basic knowledge and then more advanced knowledge, or was it just kind of same level like throughout?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I think I've always been quite like self-guided in terms of how I learn, and so honestly I think university, yes, like I think having assigned readings like encouraged me to like read up more about certain topics, but I think a lot of my learning just came from like speaking up during seminars, like being like opinionated, like expressing my opinions. I've always been opinionated, like actually speaking up, and like even just things like, you know, going to university and like living with 7 other people, like things like that, I think taught me more than my course did, honestly. But equally, I was quite lucky. My course was quite flexible, and not only did I do sort of media and sociology modules, I also did creative writing modules all throughout my degree. I did a gender and women's studies minor during first year, and so like I very much had the option to like tailor my course to my interests and to what I wanted to learn about. And equally, like I remember, I mean, also this just comes with like, you know, learning to be more assertive. And I remember I was doing a module, I think it was called Family and Intimate Relationships in a Global Context, and I was like, I want to do this. I want to write this essay about polyamory, which is something we hadn't been taught anything about. But I was adamant. I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to research it. It's going to be great. Please let me do this. And they did. So they were quite good like that. They were quite receptive to new things. And I mean, my dissertation even, I made an EP which hadn't been done before, you know, and they let me do that.
We're gonna get onto that.
Yeah.
So did the course make any profound difference in your thinking?
Yeah. I guess thinking analytically, I think it did for sure. And I think one of the things, like learning, so I did a few projects where I would like interview people. I did this one project called Queering Gender, where I interviewed a bunch of different queer people and did like a photography sort of series around that and around gender and around sexuality. And then I also did sort of like an activist project called Authorship, which is where I did research about different problematic authors and read up on it and made leaflets and slipped them into books in my library.
I remember that. That was so cheeky. I loved it.
And they kept getting taken out and I just print more and put them in. So I think learning to be like louder and like the activism comes in many shapes and forms. Like doing that kind of stuff. I mean, the fact that I essentially was doing something that was a bit cheeky and I got graded for it and I got like my A star was quite funny. Like I'm disrupting the system, but the system is also giving me my A star, so slight contrast. Anyway,
did you like get any pushback on like authorship? Because if they're
from the librarians a little bit, like equally they couldn't really do anything. Like I was putting a bit of paper in and like I even said on the leaflet like, just read this and make a decision whether you want to read it or not, because at the end of the day it's about being informed. I'm not going to force somebody to do something they don't want to do. But being informed, having all the information, and you know, maybe choosing a book by a less problematic author, an author who's like a woman or a person of colour or a queer person, like is generally going to be much better anyway in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I mean, especially as like their opinions will like you know seep into the book, like of
absolutely.
I feel like it's best to have like a perspective from all around. Like the more sources, the better. So rather than like cut one, like I don't want like white men sources. I only want people of color, which is fair enough. I think it's good to have all sources, every type, so you can get like all different perspectives, and that way you can easily debunk one side. Like if you know only about the left wing and you know nothing about extreme right wing, you'd be in your own bubble. But if you know about both, you can criticize.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I think it's very easy. Like, and I do this a lot, and I know a lot of friends who do the same thing. Is like surrounding yourself with like-minded people, and so then when you experience other opinions, it can be quite, you know, quite difficult, and knowing what to say can be a little bit sort of challenging, but equally it's important to be exposed to different types of views for sure.
So like, did you enjoy in your time in Lancaster University? What was your best aspect of it?
Oh, interesting. I think I think second and third year I really sort of grew into myself more and put myself out there. Like I was president of like my feminist society. I started doing like pole fitness, which was really fun. I was doing more like activist stuff and being more vocal on campus, and all stuff that can be quite draining but equally like felt really worthwhile. And actually, like, I don't know what I want to do with my life, but I do know that I want to make a difference, and to, you know, when you do something and you see that it is making a difference, or even if, you know, you're just holding the door open for somebody, like little things like that, like is kind of what keeps me going.
Yeah.
So I think it really helped me put myself out there more, and I think because I'd been so depressed for so many years, and once I got on the right kind of medication and stuff, I very much was like, I don't want to waste a second. I want to do as much as I can, and I think I did take that a bit far, just in terms of like draining myself a little bit, but equally, like, I put myself out there. I said yes to more things. I didn't let anxiety and depression rule my life like they had for so many years, and I think that was really important, and important to challenge myself and to do. Yeah.
What were like the biggest things you said yes to then, like after all that? Like, would you say like
I think it's difficult. Things like being president of a feminist society. Like, originally I wasn't gonna go for it, but nobody else was, and so I was just like, okay, I guess I'll do this. Like, and before I would have just straight out been like, no, and I wouldn't have even turned up to the sessions to be able to, you know, even get that role.
Yeah.
And things like pole, where like people who are good at pole like make it look very easy, but it takes a long time to like get the strength and like get the moves right. And so many times I nearly just like quit, but like I kept going because I really enjoyed it, and the atmosphere was just so welcoming and empowering. And I know that it's all this stereotype about like pole fitness and that we're all just going to be strippers and be like bringing each other in the strip clubs.
That was what like our mum.
Oh
like,
yeah, and of course, but it's funny because like I would then like I started sending her videos of me at like pole sessions, and she was like, "Wow, that is athletic. Like that is really cool."
Yeah.
And then she started talking about going to a pole class with me, and now she's even offered to like pay for my pole classes because I'm going to start them up again. And you know, I think our parents have definitely over the past few years like grown. But also it's funny because my mum will like, I'll be like, do you remember when you said this? And she flat out denies everything. Like her way isn't really apologising, it's just denial. Yeah. But it's no, they're great. They're very good at sort of reflecting, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're gonna take a little break for the time being. Of course we'll continue on with the rest of the script later. Yeah. Thank you for having you on, Ellie.
And we'll see you guys soon.
We'll see you guys soon. Yeah. So welcome back to the Container Chats podcast. I'm Sharon Nazir. This is Andrew Pont to the Tink.
As you know.
And let's continue on with where we left off. So we were talking to you, Ella Ponting over here, and now we're going to continue on with your music and your other projects.
Awesome.
So tell us more about this EP. What was it about?
This is the Blue EP.
Yeah. So it was part of my dissertation for my undergrad. So we had the option to either do like a sort of theoretical dissertation, a research dissertation, or media project. And I went media project, which was like the new option for that year. And so I was like, right, I've always wanted to create an EP. This is a great excuse. And yeah, so it's called Blue, and it's sort of about mental health. Each song is about mental health. I wrote most of the songs for that EP specifically, although a few I sort of already had in my under my belt before that.
You say that like each song's about mental health. Like how did you do that? Was it like each song was about a specific thing about mental health, or was it more about like a specific experience of yours with mental health?
I didn't really have I think the specific theme going throughout was like more things like imagery and themes of like naturalistic themes and sort of like the colour blue. So but each one was sort of a different perspective. So some was more like first person, some was more like second person, which so like more detached or whatever. But yeah, each song was quite different. And at like different points of sort of documenting different points of my recovery and different observations I had about mental health in general.
Yeah, and like I remember you saying this. Am I right in saying that this is also about like music therapy? Like that was a part of it as well?
Yes. We had to have like a research title, and so mine was on confessional music discourses, and so it was about how music can be empowering for mental health survivors. So the EP was sort of proof of that, I guess, almost.
So if that's how you approached it, I would ask that, like, wouldn't that not find it more difficult? Like, of course I've not heard the EP itself, but wouldn't it not be more depressing in that situation? Like, you understand what I'm saying? Like, it's like, if you listen like to a Kid Cudi song, you're not going to feel happy after that.
I think all my songs have... like a lot of them, I'd probably say most of them, have kind of serious, depressing undertones or overtones even. But they're also uplifting, you know. In many ways, a lot of them, like a lot of those songs are reflective, or they were written during a time in my life where things weren't as great. And so I think I was able to do that EP specifically at that point in my life because I did have that time and distance, which I wouldn't have had if I'd done it, say, a year earlier. And
when you say as well, like, you know, if someone's listening to like that EP and like hearing the stuff that you're talking about, and they've also like relate to that and have gone through it, then they can also identify that they're not alone, because obviously it's very isolating, like being depressed.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like even when I was doing research for this project, like and finding songs about mental health, there weren't many, or at least I didn't feel like there were ones that were either authentic or depicted mental health in a way that wasn't like glamorizing. I mean, you hear all the stuff like Halsey, for example, which like I feel like she can tend to like glorify it almost.
You know what? I feel like it will not depend, because like you can get music that's like dedicated specifically to like mental health and depression.
Yeah.
But then there's songs that are not about that altogether. It might be about someone's life, or like let's just say a rapper. Yeah. But he'll still talk very deeply about his mental health, like J. Cole or someone else. Yeah,
I mean, I don't think you have an obligation as an artist who is mentally ill to talk about it. I think it was just personally for me, almost a symptom of my depression was being closed off and not talking. And so part of my recovery really was to be open about it and start these dialogues. And in the process, if it can help people, or if someone can listen to it and get something from it, then that's also a good thing. And like I feel like I didn't have those kind of narratives when I was a kid, and so I think creating those narratives is quite empowering as well. Creating the representation you didn't necessarily have.
So how did your music evolve after the EP?
Well, not quite so many mental health songs. I still write about mental health, but more so in my journal, I'd say, than in my songs. But it kind of depends. I think I write all my songs like based on personal experience. I mean, when I wrote songs when I was younger, and wasn't yet in touch with my emotions or ready to write or talk about it, they just weren't good songs, really. And I think that's what changed for me with the writing process, was like when I finally started getting help, and when I started sort of becoming a bit more self-aware. I think that's when the better songs I think emerged.
So you feel like by doing your Blue EP and getting like understanding your mental health issues or whatnot, and like dealing with that, that helped like shape your next album, like your future in music, and like it changed.
I think so. Yeah, I think my album that I'm working on currently is definitely very different from my EP, and about different kind of topics, and some are still like serious topics, but it's more of a range, and it's more I don't know, I think it's more cheery. At least in some ways. I think it's more uplifting, probably. I mean, it's difficult to say. I think everyone's listening experiences are going to be different, and I'm still very proud of the EP that I did, but I'm constantly evolving as, quote unquote musician. I don't know if I'd call myself that. So, I feel like I can only get better. So hopefully I continue to sort of, create music, because that is one of my.
So is music something you want to take further then? Was it like or do your dreams lie elsewhere?
I'm not sure, because I don't feel like it's something I could necessarily pursue as a career or like make money from. And luckily, like, that's not why I do it, and I'm privileged enough to like, be able to like work part-time and then spend the rest of my time on things like music and other projects. But in an ideal world that would be great, but I don't know if that's a possibility, at least not for me right now. And I also think a lot of the sort of being a woman in music and having that as a career is really difficult, and it's difficult to make money from it. It's difficult to it's just a difficult industry to be in.
So if not if not music, like what other ways like would you express yourself? Like, would you say?
Well, I think.
And then you've done like some painting.
I think I love like being creative. I love creativity, and so if I'm not, I'm always going to be writing or creating in some way. And so that's why I'm not. I'm not too bummed that maybe music wouldn't necessarily be this like main focal point, because I know that, I'd love to release, for example, like a collection of poems and short stories at some point. I'd love to like teach like maybe little art classes for young people, or you know, like I think there are so many different ways of being creative and expressing yourself creatively. And I think I always used to think I wasn't creative because, you know, I couldn't really draw very well, and my short stories and stuff, people be like, that's weird, don't vibe with that. But you know, everyone creates things in different ways, and as long as you're having fun, you're expressing yourself and encouraging other people to do the same, like you can't go wrong with that. Yeah.
So a lot of people keep most of their like personality and experiences like of their life hidden away from social media. How did you become comfortable sharing most of your like information?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's really difficult because I feel like there's going to be a part of it with social media culture that it is, some of it is vanity and some of it is self-promoting and probably a bit self-aggrandizing as well. So it's, as much as I love to say 100% of it is, you know, just being open and owning my truth and owning my voice. And there is a part of that, for sure. I think that there is a percentage of it that isn't, which, you know, I think I have a responsibility to like own up to.
But you're being honest, and that's human. You know?
Yeah, absolutely.
No human is necessarily 100% like about the open honesty. And
for me, at the moment at least, like being open online and being transparent online is giving me more benefits than negatives. But I also recognize that like that might not always be the case. But for me, like it's where a lot of my activism has happened. It's where a lot of friendships and relationships have been formed from. It's a way of documenting my life. It's a way of trying to gain more body acceptance. You know, so it's provided a lot of really meaningful tools, really. But you know, with anything like that, it's going to have its downsides. For
so
sure.
what do you accomplish by doing this other than self-expression?
Interesting. I don't know if I'm really one to say. I depend. Everyone, well, I'm sure, like view my social media presence or whatever in a different way. I don't know. Hopefully, like if like putting narratives out there that people can relate to, people can gain something from. I mean, there's normally, well, maybe not always, but there's often good things to gain from somebody being transparent and somebody sharing their truth. And you know, I think social media has been a point in my life, kind of like an online journal of sorts. Whether that's a good thing or bad thing is debatable. But I think as well, alongside self-expression, I think like somebody else reading it and like relating with it is a cool thing, and speaking about something that I can speak about.
That's the beauty of the internet, because you could be like speaking to someone from anywhere in the world, and they can see your online journal, whether from any country, from any age or background, and they can maybe relate to that. And you don't know who that is. It could be someone from Scotland, someone from China, but like the goal is a connection between two different people.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And it's really cool. But you know, digressing a little bit, I want to talk about growing up bi and your experiences growing up bi in Edinburgh. So of course it can be very difficult, especially before the age of social media. When did you recognize yourself as bisexual?
You said it was when you were 14.
Yes. Yeah. So I feel like it probably would have been sooner, like earlier than that, if I'd had that vocabulary, but I just hadn't. I think when I was 14 was the first time I'd heard somebody else call themselves bisexual, and it was actually on it's embarrassing, but I've already mentioned this on other platforms. It was on Ask FM. I don't know if anyone remembers that that platform that was it was especially quite big with like sort of emo subcultures and stuff, and that was how I expressed myself at that point in my life. Definitely interesting and a lot of eyeliner. But yeah, it was, I started to see people who, you know, dressed like me and express themselves similarly to me, identifying as bisexual. And I'd never, like, I mean, I must have heard of the word before that, I'm sure, but like I'd never actually heard anyone identify themselves that way. And I think that's what initially made me think about it, because something, like, I already identified with them in other ways, and something just sort of clicked, I think, when I heard that label. I mean, I've gone by other labels. I've gone by like pansexual, queer, gay as an umbrella term. but I think, yeah, I've been using bi more even just in the past like month, because I feel like I had a lot of internalized biphobia that I still like trying to work through, and so I'm trying to sort of reclaim
Explain
that.
what that is, just for people who don't know, like biphobia. I mean, obviously bi and phobia explains some of it, but yeah.
Well, I mean, it's gonna be different for everyone, but for me, it's sort of like, when I talk about internalized biphobia, I talk about like the internalization of negative stereotypes and assumptions towards bisexual people. And so that can be sort of like feeling like I have to like pick a side, quote unquote, or like, what are other ones? Feeling like I have to present more feminine or more masculine, or like feeling that like if I'm with a woman, then people are going to think I'm gay, and if I'm with a man, then people are going to raise like the queer part of my identity. And so yeah, that's always quite prevalent, I think, in the back of my mind, and like I can have a complicated relationship with it sometimes, and I think like I'm someone that's dealt with sexual trauma, specifically by men. I mean also by women, but mainly by men, and so I've generally been dating women more, and I don't think that's a trauma response necessarily, but I think my ability to trust men is very difficult. And so in a way, I mean, I'm not going to say it's easier to date a woman, because you've got a lot of like not so great stuff in terms of like societal views or whatever. But I think in terms of me and in terms of my ability to trust somebody, I immediately go to not trusting somebody, and they have to like earn my trust. So I immediately start with no trust with most people, but I feel like I can trust a woman generally more easily than I can a man. Yeah.
So I want to make a quick comparison between Oxford and Edinburgh, but let's start with Oxford. So what was it like growing up in Oxford? Was it completely fine, like mostly fine? Yeah. Or were there like complications and challenges?
Yeah.
Well, see, I wasn't out when I was in Oxford, really. I mean, I talked about it with some of my close friends, all of which who, shock and horror, are bi, but like didn't know it. So I talk about it with them. They'd be like, "Oh yeah, like I feel that way too." And I was like, "Okay, straight pals, like this is also straight." And turns out we were all a bit gay. Big shocker there. But anyway, so yeah, I wasn't out, and so my experience was a bit minimal, yeah. And I did want to be out, but I already felt like quite an outsider at school. I didn't feel popular. I didn't feel comfortable in that environment, and I didn't feel myself. I didn't really know what myself was, identity crisis, all that. So I wasn't out, and it was strange. Like there are some people who are out at my school, like there are some girls who are out as bi, but they were popular, and so in the back of my head I was like, I can't, like, I'm unpopular, so me being bi is not cool. It's fine for them because they're already popular, but this is just going to be another thing that makes me an outsider, and I just can't deal with that. And so I didn't. I very much repressed it, and even like when I was 14, I had my first boyfriend, and this was around the time I was questioning my sexuality, and so I very much panicking because I was thinking, I was in this headspace of like, I need to choose. And so when I was figuring out that I was attracted to women as well as men, and I was with my first boyfriend, I very much like was panicking because I was like, oh my god, am I lying to him? Like, am I really gay? Like all this kind of stuff. Because I was still very much like, had internalized biphobia.
And how much of that like changed when you came to Edinburgh?
I think I'm not sure about Edinburgh specifically. I think it was more going to university and going to Lancaster, and I think especially like it's a smaller town, and the queer population was so like concentrated almost, and everyone knew everyone, and that was also just a queer kind of thing. Like the LGBT community, everyone, like there is a slight stereotype that is slightly true of like everyone dating everyone, and everyone is dating someone's ex, and all this kind of stuff, which never happened to me. So I think that really helped. And then when I moved back to Edinburgh, like the queer community just feels so much more vibrant and so much more present. Like I feel like I see queer couples holding hands all the time. I will say that like yeah, like queer clubs, not so great. And
that's true. Are there any queer clubs like here? And
yeah, so there's like the Pink Triangle, it's called, but they used to have more, but they shut down. We don't have things like lesbian bars, which used to be a big thing back in like the sort of 80s, 90s, and like pre-Stonewall. But equally, also like we have just like we've made no progress in terms of like trans rights, and especially at like, you know, gay bars and stuff. Like I've had trans friends like get kicked out of like the ladies' bathrooms, and it's awful. It's absolutely awful. Like I can talk about biphobia all day, but it's nothing compared to like what trans people go through. It's honestly awful. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And then in general, would you say like Edinburgh is like more like liberal than Oxford in this way? Like it's a lot easier like to be like bi and be like openly bi here. Or I mean, obviously it's not completely yes or no, but
yeah, I think it's difficult because like Oxford me a few years ago and like me in Edinburgh feel very so separate. But I think I would say yes. I do think Scotland in general is more liberal than England. We got Sturgeon, you know. It's a bit less, you know, full of Tories. So, yeah, I would say so. And I think, you know, we also have like a big student population in Edinburgh, and we have more diversity in general. I mean, Oxford was fairly, actually, like where we live was fairly diverse in Oxford, but like, if you go like half an hour out of town, like it will just a sea of white. I wouldn't even call it a sea, it was sort of blank. a blank wall. The canvas of whiteness,
And this is kind of like a random question, but like, are there any unique experiences in Edinburgh, you know, from being bi? You know, I know you've said it's you know, it's hard to kind of separate when you're so different, but like, you know, would you say it's true to say like the bi community here is like really strong, and like, you know, like there's a unique experiences here in relation to that?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, there are like bi groups and stuff, which I think is cool, because I don't think that existed in Lancaster, at least.
Apart from the society.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I've mainly dated by like other bi women, or like women who aren't totally gay. I mean, so I think that's been really interesting, because I feel like I wouldn't say I prefer it, but I like that there's kind of this underlying understanding that like, you know, of like biphobia, and that like occasionally when I have dated women who identify as lesbian, like I have gotten like unspoken, but I have gotten a sense of like, oh, you've had a dick in you, like you've slept with a guy, like, oh, like you're a bit like tainted almost, you know, and that's a kind, like you get biphobia within the community, and you know, almost like a purity, like being gold star and like having never slept with a guy or whatever, and I mean, and it's weird to me because like I'm just gonna say like everyone is bisexual because nobody is 100% one thing or another. You can even be 0.0001% like gay, and you're still dictionary definition bi. You know, we're such a big community full of such a range of different experiences and emotions.
People say that being bisexual is not is unnatural, but throughout all of human history, like having sex with a man having sex with a man, or a woman has been very, very common.
I mean, come on, the Greeks and butt sex,
other animals do it, like, and we have, you know, like I think males have things in their like anus that can increase, like, have pleasure.
I've been reading this book called it's called like The Curious History of Sex or something, and and I think the last chapter I was reading like was about like the history of like vibrators and all this kind of stuff, and
the history of vibrators,
and like they first invented like ages and ages ago, and like supposedly to like cure women of hysteria and stuff.
I heard about that.
And like,
they had like a doctor like who would like fingered a woman. What?
And then they invented the vibrator. This is actually, I think this part is actually a myth. I don't think this actually happened, but I do kind of love it. And they invented the vibrator because like they were getting like carpal tunnel. So they invented the vibrator so they wouldn't have to keep fingering.
Apparently the doctors would have to finger so many people like the girls would lie. Oh, I'm so unwell, it's so hysterical sometimes.
Oh, doctor, save me!
It's like, I want a cute doctor.
I have an illness on my vagina. Can you rub it and make it better?
Okay, just this one time.
Sorry, vulva. Vagina is internal, you guys. Anyway.
Oh.
Gotta be correct.
Yeah. External is the vulva. I'd explain this to my parents, which was a thrilling conversation. Anyway.
So moving on from vibrators, and just like the whole bi kind of questions we have for you. Relating to your Instagram accounts, you often speak about issues of mental health. Sure. For our generation, what are your current opinions on the mental health crisis? There's a lot to talk about, but anything that comes to mind.
That's so difficult. I think the thing that I notice most, just personally, everyone's different, is I think the hierarchy of eating disorders and stuff, and
well, someone saying my eating disorder is what do you mean by that?
So I more sort of mean that so anorexia and bulimia are the most discussed ones, but things like binge eating disorder and other eating disorders are more prevalent, to be honest. And also there's this glorification that comes with anorexia and starving yourself, and you're seen as having great self-control, and you're seen as having great self-control, and you're essentially making yourself thinner, and you're making yourself take up less space, and people like that, and that's a really disturbing, sad truth. And there is this weird almost hierarchy when it comes to eating disorders, and it makes it even more difficult for sufferers to open up about it, and especially ones like bulimia, binge eating disorder, where it's very much seen as a lack of control. And you lost in a way, you try to starve yourself, but you failed, and then now you binged, and it really adds to the stigma. It's already such a difficult thing to deal with, but there is this these sort of cultural and social connotations that go with it, and it's, especially if you're someone, you're not taken seriously, especially by medical professionals, if you're not underweight, and you can be anyway and have any kind of eating disorder. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a mental illness. It's not. It can manifest physically, but it's a mental health issue. And when I was young and I was showing signs of having an eating disorder, I remember the doctor making me hop on the scale, and they were like, okay, so you're a bit underweight, but you're not that underweight, so we're just gonna wait essentially and see if you get worse. And it was essentially treating me okay, when you get worse, then we'll help you, but for now we don't really care. And it was really dismissive, and it would be the same when I started going to, I think it's called PCAMS or CAMS, it's Children and Adult Mental Health Services, which is by the NHS. And when I first started opening up about my eating issues, my body image issues, they would, every time I went back, they would make me have a weigh-in, which was not nice, and again just reinforced okay, I've got to starve myself for this weigh-in or whatever. That's what the disordered mind goes to, and it, their treatment doesn't work for most people because it's not tailored towards the individual. It's
for a large amount of people,
awful.
generalized.
Exactly. And it's all sort of food diaries and mood diaries, and tracking and doing quizzes, and it's very much treating you like you're a problem, and that needs to be solved. And it's a lot of people act like okay, this has worked for me, just so they get let off this service, because it's very much, it doesn't often work, the way they approach it. I mean, I'm not criticising the NHS in general because they're underfunded, and I'm criticising a little bit. Mental health services suck, but they do their best. It's really not great. And I had a quite traumatizing experience where the person who was my support worker or whatever was broke my confidentiality, which you're allowed to do if you think that your patient like is in danger, is like at risk to themselves, and will like hurt themselves. But even when you do that, like you still have to inform them that that's what you're going to do. And they essentially broke that confidentiality, and they sent a letter to an eating disorder support group for families to my parents. And I don't know why, but I saw that there was a letter addressed to my parents, and I opened it for some reason. I just had like a sixth sense, and I opened it, and I saw it, and I was furious and terrified, and I burnt it in a fire. That's how badly I didn't want my parents to see it. I burnt it in a literal fire because I was that ashamed, you know, and definitely my formative experiences with the like going to the doctors and mental health services was so negative that I didn't go back. I didn't return to therapy for another 4 years because I was traumatized. Really,
that like definitely like, you know, you put your trust in like the NHS like a lot.
They did that, so.
And like something to happen like that.
That's these are some of the first people I was opening up to, and it did not, you know, didn't go the way I needed it to go.
Yeah, and so like you know, you've alluded to a lot of different things, but like what do you think like needs to like kind of change like in like just like take it more seriously and be more sensitive to like all the different like types of eating disorders? Or
we need the doctors to treat people who are showing early signs of eating disorders. They need to take that seriously, and not wait until until things get worse. Essentially, we need to not treat it in a way that is treating it like a physical problem. Obviously, I totally get in terms of like people suffering from anorexia and being like undernourished and needing hospital treatment. Like, I think that's a different thing and something I probably can't touch on personally. But at the end of the day, it's a mental health issue.
I was about to say it's mental health issue.
It's a mental health issue.
Maybe thinking about it like that.
I think compulsory PSHE and students having to take an exam on PSHE, so they literally have to like learn it and absorb the information, and having part of that be teaching about eating disorders and mental health issues and like difficult topics that we need. I mean, if you're going to grade us, which already I'm like, why is school grading like 10-year-olds? But anyway, but if we're going to do that, like, do it on things that, like, everyone goes through and everyone needs to learn about, even just to be, like, a good support system for people who are going through that.
So, what would you say is something that you wish more people who knew about, like, mental health as a common thing?
Just one thing.
I guess if you had to pick one thing, because otherwise it would take a while to list all the things. A lot of things, probably. Like
something that many, many more people who don't know anything about mental health, you wish they just understood a little bit better. I think there's a lot of things that I can say, but I think not commenting on someone's weight is like a big thing. It's just not necessary. Not using weight as a compliment, oh, you're looking really slim. Not using weight as a measure for self-worth. I think changing the language that we use as a society, rewarding under-eating and undernourishment and over-exercising, and, you know, punishing binging and punishing, you know, people who aren't the size that such a small percentage of the population are. I think it starts with the language. I really think it does. And I just remember being triggered so much when I was prior to recovery, through recovery, even now. And I've had to have difficult conversations with like friends and family members where I've had to be like, hey, I can't hear you say that. If you're gonna talk about this, like, you know, you need to ask me first if it's okay. Which is why I was saying earlier to you to like put a trigger warning on the video, because you know, even this conversation might be triggering for some people. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's easy to like
any way to help.
It's easy to like to forget about that, you know, because, you know, like, and just like realize that like this would be like, it could trigger someone. Because you haven't been in that experience yourself. But
absolutely.
So I feel like with your personal experience, it's kind of like it can put you in a bit of a fog. Like everything outside of that fog is just so foreign, like, I've been through this, why don't you understand my way? But it can go both ways. You're like,
I think it's a key quality.
My health, like weight issues or health or like this kind of stuff. Whereas other people are like, why don't you care about my unemployment, my finance issues when you're too worried about your simple issues? So people will like be like, my issues important, and it can always
it's like a hierarchy of issues in a way. It's strange. And I think you really touched upon it there, is like empathy, and we all need to be taught how to empathize properly, because we might not have experienced something, but empathy is something we all need to just be able to be supportive.
I feel like empathy, but also compassion, because with empathy it's kind of like you feel what they feel, but there can be issues with that. Let's just say when you empathize with someone in particular, let's say a refugee, you're putting a light on them, where everything about them is shown, and everything is so bright, and you hear every detail. But when it comes to the actual like everything outside of that, you forget about, let's just say, the Israel and Palestine thing. When you focus on Palestine, you only think about what's happening in Palestine. You might forget about maybe some issues with Israel or other things and whatnot. So it's stuff like that. You can...
I definitely... No, I agree with what you're saying. I think by definition, though, empathy is more about... It's not about internalizing and feeling what the other person's feeling. It's more understanding and showing compassion. And that's how it perhaps differs from sympathy. Empathy is on a deeper level. But you're right. It's... You've got to have compassion, otherwise it doesn't do anything.
Yeah, so let's get into your post-uni aspirations. So with you graduating university in 2020, of course, you're talking about your music, your album on the works and whatnot. But other than that, what are some of your plans for the next stage of your life?
Wow. Well, my current plan is that I don't have any plans. So my plan is to move back in my parents whilst I sort out what I'm doing. And initially I felt a bit embarrassed by that, but honestly, I'd rather do it now. I'd rather figure out what I want to do, where I want my life to go, and sort of have that time and have that space so I can save up money. And I'm lucky that I get on my parents very well, and having that structure in my life, I think, will also be a positive thing. I mean, there will be some negotiations, I'm sure, and things that will be perhaps more challenging than others. But at the end of the day, I'm very lucky, and my parents have a very nice, quite large house, and so we have enough space to have our separate lives whilst being in the same house.
Even though at the moment our mum is currently working in your room.
Well, yeah, she's
but she'll change that.
For someone so small, she can take up so much space. For someone who literally everyone's just like, oh, she's sweet, and then she stomps up the stairs like no one's watching.
What if your mother sees this? Not gonna be too happy.
What, sorry?
If your mother sees this podcast, she won't be too happy.
Oh, I mean, she won't listen to it.
She won't get this far in. She won't get this far in.
No, she doesn't really, they don't really listen to my music or podcasts or anything, which is maybe a good thing.
So currently you're working in a support worker position.
I am, yeah.
How's that been? I know it's a mixed bag. It's been the highs and the lows.
Yeah, as you said, a mixed bag. However, like I said earlier, my aim in life is to provide support for people, or to help people in some way. And so support work was a really good entry into that. And also previously having no experience, and thankfully they took me in, and it's more based on you being a friendly person and then doing the right training and it's had its challenges. I mean, it's quite an emotionally taxing job, as I'm sure other support workers will tell you, but it is rewarding, and especially, if you really bond with a service user, you're in their house, in their life a lot, and so you're going to bond with them, hopefully, at least. And it can be quite rewarding, but equally it can be, quite emotionally draining, and you have to do a lot of the kind of home admin stuff, a lot of the cleaning, meds, breakfast, all that stuff can also take 10 times longer when they have physical impairments, and you have to use things like hoists and slings, and a morning routine that for you or I could take 5 minutes, it takes much longer. Yeah, so it's.
Would you continue to like do this, or like you think you'll kind of like reach the end point of being a support worker?
I personally don't think so. I think.
Like you wouldn't do it again.
It's really difficult to say.
Yeah.
So I'm still doing it at the moment. Because I want to sort of figure out. I want to get some volunteering under my belt and kind of see what stuff is out there, whether I need to return to education. But yeah. I think for now I'm keeping with it probably for the next at least 3 months, I'd say, realistically. But after that, who knows? Who knows? I think it's always something that I could return to. But whether I would want to necessarily is another thing. But I'm very lucky. Like the other staff members are just so nice, and the service user generally are also very nice. So I'm quite fortunate because that's not everyone's. You do hear care horror stories.
Yeah. So of course, like I said earlier, you graduated in 2020 last year, and during that time was the pandemic. So like, how was it? How was it graduating during the pandemic? It must have really sucked.
It wasn't the easiest, but I mean, I was lucky in a sense that my dissertation was due like, I don't know, mid-May, end of May, something like that. And so it was really at the start of the pandemic, and I didn't really think much about, well, I mean, obviously my parents were very worried about the pandemic, and I was to a certain extent, but I also had my dissertation to focus on, and at that point, of course, we all thought it would just be a couple months, max. Yeah, I know. Clearly that did not happen. So yeah, I think I was in a bit of a bubble for a while. I think it more hit me, so I ended up starting a postgrad in counselling that September, and had a bit of a mental health relapse, which kind of threw me for a loop, and so I had an almost delayed reaction, I'd say. And yeah, the pandemic definitely didn't help, and I'd gone from like being at university where I was like president of societies and had an active social life and active in terms of my course, to not really having much of a direction, which I think a lot of people going out of university can relate to. And yeah, in all honesty, I think I rushed into like doing a master's because I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I knew that I would be good at being a counsellor. I still think I would be. I just think it's wrong timing, and I think I need more life experience and more distance and more work on myself, and more distance from my issues and more work on myself.
It's good you know that, so you're not rushing.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously I wish I'd realised it earlier. However, I still learnt very valuable things during the short time I was on that course.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Guess better late than never, eh?
Yeah, and a lot of people on my course were like, middle aged, some even older, and it made me think like, oh, okay, like maybe if I do want to return to this later on in life, it is an option.
Yeah. That door's open for you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
All right, so
there we have it.
Yeah, that's it. So yeah, it wasn't that terrifying, was it?
No, I mean, once I get talking, you know me, I can't stop. So I hope even some of this made sense.
And before we finish, can we shout out anything for the viewers? Your social media, your websites, any projects, anything?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can follow like my music stuff on Instagram, SoundCloud, Spotify, Facebook. It's all at Ella Karen Music.
Links will be in the bio and in the description.
Yes.
And we'll probably put something up on the screen if you figure out how to do that.
Yeah, and as I said, I'm currently working on my album. I just released a new single called Vulnerable, which you can...
Any show us a shout out for Bonnie.
My number one fan over there.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen her yet. Number one fan in the corner.
And then I also have an Instagram that talks about like mental health and like queerness, and it's at Sad Bad Queer Bitch.
Of course.
Which
it's a very interesting narrative, and it's.
I took a bunch of my descriptors and I put them together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But other than that, it was great to have you, Ella. Thank you so much for coming on and having this conversation with us. And yeah, just thank you so much.
And trusting us, and doing a good job.
Thanks for having me. I've had a lot of fun.
And before we leave, you're going to perform a little ditty for us, aren't you?
Yeah, if you insist.
Fantastic.
So great.
China.
You guys will see that soon.
Yeah.
And I've been Sharu Nazir. This has been
Adam Ponting the Ting.
And thank you so much for having Ella. We have Sasha in the back as our technician.
Yeah, thanks so much, man. He's his first time doing this, besides a bit earlier, so thank you so much
and
for
we have a friend on too, in the back too, Alicia.
Yeah,
so
you're gonna see a lot more of her in the future.
It's Ella's fan club, if anything.
Hey.
Ella's fan club in the background. The manager, if you may.
Oh my God. Love
But
it.
yeah, thank you so much,
Yeah.
and we'll see you all later.
Yeah, see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Ella Cameron, the umbrella. Ella Cameron, the
Ella
umbrellas,
Cameron.
everybody. Woo! Feminism.
Okay, so I'm gonna play my new single called Vulnerable. It's a song about sex and vulnerability. Cotton dead here, don't know what to do. Do I make a move? Do I follow through? Cookie, can you let me know if you want it slow? Do you want me to? I can be your nurse. Cause my hands are exploding, I feel your body warming. I'm trying to play it cool, but my mind's kinda worried, and you look so alert. I can't help but stare at you. Cause I wanna touch you, I wanna be scared, I wanna be intimate, something. I wanna taste you, I wanna persist, I wanna be so fucking vulnerable. Moving to a beat where rhythmic blues getting in a groove, I can feel her grooves. Yeah, you're my favorite sound, I can hear you loud. Was it on and loud? Still it's going down, down. Cause my hands are exploding, I feel your body warming. I'm trying to play it cool, but my mind's kinda worried, and you look so alert. I can't help but stare at you. Cause I wanna touch you, I wanna be scared, I wanna be intimate, something. I wanna taste you, I wanna be teased, I wanna be so fucking vulnerable. So safe, so satisfied. Her appetites were wild. You found me round your finger, and let me nibble it too. Cause I wanna touch you, I wanna be scared, I wanna be intimate, something. I wanna taste you, I wanna be teased, I wanna be. Cause I wanna touch you, I wanna be scared, I wanna be intimate, someone there. I wanna taste you, I wanna be teased, I wanna be so fucking vulnerable.